Today on Positive Talk Daily, we're talking about if you're someone buying a Samsung phone. Maybe you're coming from an S10, S10 Plus. Maybe you're coming from one of the Ultra devices like the S21 Ultra, one of those older phones. And moving your way up into an S22 Ultra, S23 Ultra, S24 Ultra, or even the S25 Ultra. Are you better off going with an older Samsung Galaxy Ultra device? Or maybe you should go for the subpar S series device, the standard one. There's a lot of Samsung phones out there, especially in the on the used marketplace. Now, if you go onto eBay and try to search, say, for an S25 Ultra, S22, S24 Ultra, one of the more newer modern S20, S series phones, they're going to be pretty expensive. And even last year's S24 is still in the $500, $600, $700 range. The best option, which I've been seeing a lot recently, is the S22 Ultra, which comes with an older Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 chipset, but it does come with 12 gigabytes of RAM, and it can also come with 128 gigs of storage, or 256, or even 512. We've even seen the 1 terabyte model. So, do you really necessarily need to go with an S25 Ultra when, yes, you're getting maybe slightly better cameras on an S25 Ultra, but they all do the same thing. They all have 5,000 mAh batteries. They both have 48-watt fast charging across the board. Yes, you may be getting a 200 megapixel camera from the S23 all the way up to the S25, but as far as camera tech goes on a Samsung Galaxy Ultra phone, they're all going to be pretty close to the same. I've been watching videos on YouTube where a lot of the phones take similar pictures, if not the same. In some categories, the S22 look better than the S25 did in some areas. So if it's more for photography, yeah, you'll be getting a slightly upgraded camera on the S25. But if you're coming from something like an S22, S23, you really ain't going to see much of a difference. Now, in performance, yeah, you may see a little bit more of a performance boost. The S22 Ultra was not the best performing phone. The 8 Gen 1 chipset was pretty poor in a lot of areas. It would overheat. Gaming wasn't great, and it would glitch occasionally when it did get hot and the battery wasn't the greatest. Once they went to the 8 Gen 2 on the S23 Ultra, things got a little bit better. Thermal management was better, cooling was better, and any of those kind of phones felt better on an S23 versus the S22. Now, the S22 wasn't a bad phone by any means. And if you're someone who still uses an S22, they're still reasonably cheap. You can get them for anywhere from $350 on eBay. Brand spanking new, in box, sealed. We're actually going to be taking a look at an S22 Ultra in a few weeks to see how that compares to the newer S25 is in the specs department. Geekbench numbers are still pretty good for the S22. Not too much off from the S23 as far as daily use and multitasking. They're actually pretty close. If you're just buying a phone, the S22 Ultra is going to be better than any A series smartphone. So, if you're coming from an A series phone, trust me, you're going to see decent performance in an S22 Ultra. It does have a 120 hertz refresh rate. It is running the latest, One UI 7, so it's running the same software as S25. You are still getting a decent, beautiful OLED display, so it's not really a terrible looking phone. The brightness still pretty bright. So any of the S series phones or S Ultra phones you go for, they're all going to perform about the same. Neither phone is really going to be, going to be the worst phone you've ever used. Again, I think if you're coming from, say, the S10, S9, anything like that was as far back as 2019 to 2020, it may be time to look at something different. But if you're coming from like an S21 Ultra to an S22, yeah, you're not going to see any problems with those types of phones. They're all going to run better than an A series device. Not that the A series phones don't run good, but as far as chipset performance, the 8 Gen chipsets are usually the best. any Snapdragon 800 chipset is usually going to be pretty solid, even if it's 5 years old. The S22 Ultra and S22 are only about 3 years old, so it's not like it's the oldest phone on the block as of 2025. You can still get really solid performance. That's why we're going to be taking a look at an S22 Ultra just to see what it does. I think they're a pretty solid phone. The cameras look pretty good. It's a 108 megapixel camera, 12 megapixel ultra wide, has 10 times zoom. So you really can't complain about a phone that's 3 years old. I think those phones are still going to perform pretty good, especially when they're still getting software updates and stuff like that. Samsung says maybe 2 to 3 more years of updates for the S22 Ultra. S23 would be a worth upgrade, but I would say if you're coming from, say, an S21, yeah, maybe time to look at something of an upgrade. The S25 could be looking at a decent upgrade. Now, the S25 is a very powerful phone. It's actually more powerful than the iPhone 16 Pro Max in Geekbench numbers and battery life and things like that. So, if you're going to be coming from, say, an iPhone, and I talk to a lot of people who are iPhone fans and are fans of Samsung phones as well, but One UI is just very customizable. It's fast, and it's even fast on older phones as well. If you're looking to pick up a used smartphone, I would say stay away from the S25 for right now. It's still too expensive. It only came out in February. It's still pretty pricey unless you're getting it on a deal through your carrier. I still think the S25 is still an expensive device. Maybe wait until next year when you can get deals on it into 2026. If you're someone who's interested in buying a used smartphone, I'm sure you can find an S23 Ultra that's used in decent condition, decent battery life. They're also selling S22 Ultras that are new, sealed in box. Make sure it's not a scam, but just look for legitimate buyers. And, they're sealed. They sell them unlocked, sealed, and most of them are using eSIMs. And really, there's no difference outside of maybe some of the specs in the processing. But overall, those phones are still decent. They run well, and they will get the job done for someone who just needs a phone to get things done. The same goes with Apple. If you're someone looking to get an iPhone Pro Max series. Now, we're sticking to the higher end devices that have the best cameras, best chipsets, best performance. Moving over to Apple now. Now, if you're someone coming from an, say, iPhone XS Max, which kind of started the Pro series of phones for Apple, they really started giving you the Pro series when the iPhone 11 Pro Max came out. Now, if you're someone coming from an older iPhone 10, XS Max, maybe you're coming from an iPhone 11 Pro Max. Is it worth upgrading to an iPhone 16 Pro Max? Let's talk about that now. Now, I think the 16 Pro Max is a seriously good phone. I think, and I'm still doing a review on it. Right now we're using it as our 30-day smartphone, and it's probably the second most powerful phone on the market, bar none. It does have pretty good Geekbench numbers. It is fast. I have noticed in my time using the iPhone 16 Pro Max on iOS 8.4 that it does glitch though, especially in the camera. I'll be editing using Apple's AI software, Apple Intelligence. I'll be editing, deleting something. And over the last few weeks, I've had it not crash, but yeah, the app literally does go out on you, and you have to relaunch it. So I don't know if it's just an iOS thing or is it just my phone. My phone does have 256 gigs of storage, but at the same time, it's just something you'll notice if you're an iPhone user. I use both Android devices and Apple devices, so I like to kind of learn both. But I notice with the camera app, it does crash occasionally or it resets itself. So just be aware of that. I haven't noticed anything on my iPad because the iPad has Apple Intelligence on it, and you can do the same thing. But if you're someone who uses an Apple device, let me know if yours crashes on my email at myfaithfm@gmail.com. Let me know if you're having issues with yours as well. Overall, the iPhone 16 Pro Max is a decent phone, but it's a kind of a disappointment because this year Apple Intelligence has been a failure. overall, most people can just download Google Gemini and might as well just stick to Android. Google Gemini can do all the AI tricks and stuff that Apple Intelligence can do, but even better. And you can also download ChatGPT if you're using an older iPhone, especially a Pro Max model. The question is, should you upgrade if you're an iPhone 11 Pro Max all the way up? The answer is no. Because Apple, especially if you're coming from an iPhone 11 Pro Max, the only advantage you're getting on iPhone 11 Pro Max, there's a few advantages. First off, you're getting 120 hertz refresh rate. So that may be a big deal because it's hard for some people, even if you're using a 90 hertz refresh rate. That's one of the issues with Apple is they think that 90 hertz is, they think 60 hertz is just perfectly fine. There's even been talks of the iPhone 17 still not having maybe a 120 hertz refresh rate, but hopefully that's not the truth because Motion Plus would be perfect for the iPhone standard editions. It's sad because a lot of the phones, like last year, a lot of people got ripped off. If you bought an iPhone 15 from 2023 and were hoping to get Apple Intelligence, you won't get Apple Intelligence. Which is ripping off people who are still, Apple's still selling the iPhone 15 at almost full price, and you're not getting 120 hertz refresh rate. You're stuck on a 60 hertz panel. You're not getting Apple Intelligence. And then the people that bought an iPhone 16 are getting ripped off because they're told that they're not going to see any of the Apple Intelligence fully come out until the iPhone 17, until this fall. So it is a big ripoff that Apple is scamming people, technically. And we know that the iPhone 15 could easily handle Apple Intelligence. They claim it has to have 8 gigs of storage to handle it. Even the iPhone 16e is coming out with the 16e is supposedly having Apple Intelligence, but not all the features are available for iPhone 16e. You're kind of stuck. The photo editing trick is not available on iPhone 16e, but it's available on the 16 and the 16 Plus. So it's like if you can bring Apple Intelligence down to the iPhone 16e, which is pretty much on par with an iPhone 15 Pro Max, I think you can bring it up to a 15 standard, even though it's using a 16 Bionic chip or a 16 chip. I think it's still very capable. So if you're coming from, say, like an iPhone 13 Pro Max, 14 Pro Max, or even the 12 Pro Max, you're not going to see any big difference. Maybe in the cameras because they're 48 megapixels. But even we've seen videos on YouTube, go check it out yourself, that the cameras really aren't that much of a difference from a 13 Pro Max all the way up to the 16. So you're really not getting a huge increase. Now, if you're coming from an 10s Max, you are getting an additional camera. If you're coming from a 11 Pro Max, you're getting 5G. So yes, coming from an older iPhone 11 Pro might be worth an upgrade to one of the Pro series phones from, say, but if you're coming from a 12, a 13, because a 13, I don't think it's really an upgrade, because 13, you're still getting, the 13, you start getting into the 48 megapixel cameras, you get into 120 hertz refresh rate, you're getting 5G, you're also getting 5G on the iPhone 12. That's why I say if you're on the iPhone 12, it's not time to upgrade yet. Now, if you want that 120 hertz refresh rate, maybe. But the iPhone 12 Pro Max is still a very good phone, and the iPhone 12 is still iPhone 12 Pro are still very good phones. You're still going to be getting decent camera performance. You're still getting 5G. I would upgrade if you're coming from iPhone 11 Pro. Now, if that's all you're on right now, that's all you have. Because over time, we know that they're going to phase out the 4G LTE networks. Just in general, by 2030, they're supposed to be rephasing out 4G LTE, kind of like they did with 3G. So if you're coming from an old 4G LTE phone, like an iPhone 11 Pro, or something even older, it may be time to look into a newer iPhone. I would say wait, if you're on 11 Pro right now, if you're on an 11 Pro or Pro Max, wait until the iPhone 17. Because I think the 16 is kind of glitchy. It does have some issues, does have a lot of bugs that Apple still hasn't fixed. So if you're coming from one of the older iPhones, which I've seen, older iPhones right now are actually running just as good, if not better, on iOS 18 than some of the newer ones are. So I don't know if it's a glitch in the system or their camera system or just Apple Intelligence in general. unless you really need Apple Intelligence or Chat GPT, if you have an older iPhone, all you have to do is just download the Chat GPT application, or which is now available on all iPhones, is you can download, which I've been seeing, you can download Gemini to your iOS device and still do AI stuff. There's other third-party applications you can download to do, like, let's say you have an iPad, the newer iPad, like the M3, or if you're coming from an iPad from last year, those two devices are going to have Apple Intelligence. So what I would say is, if you're using an iPhone 13 Pro Max or any of the iPhones, really, just edit the photos on your iPad. Use AirDrop, edit your photos on your iPad, and you can just do Apple Intelligence that way. All the same Magic Eraser and all this deleting of photos and editing can be done on last year's iPad and this year's iPad. So they both have Apple Intelligence in the software updates. So don't waste your money, even if you have an 11 Pro Max. The cameras are still very doable. Stick to your 11 Pro Max until the 17 comes out. Then it will be worth an upgrade. Right now, I just don't think, in the next 6 months maybe, but right now, if that is your main phone, the Pro Max and Pro series of the iPhone 11 is still very good. All you have to do is just take the photos, AirDrop them on your iPad, and just edit them. You'll get the same software as you would on an iPhone 11 Pro Max. Don't waste your money. If you're coming from a 12, 13, 14, or even the 15 Pro Max, it makes no sense to upgrade. You're getting 48 megapixel cameras on all three of those devices. You're wasting your money. They may have done some stuff with some camera tricks and stuff, but you'll be wasting your money because you can just edit them on your iPad. If you're running an older iPad, maybe upgrade to a newer iPad, but in the last 2 to 3 years, those 3 iPads are going to get Apple Intelligence. You'll be able to edit your photos using the Apple AI. If you're using Apple's AI software for editing photos or video, stick to the iPad. You can do all the same things you could on an iPhone 16 Pro Max or standard iPhone 16 Pro, and you can do it right on your iPad. That's what I've been doing. I just edit everything. I use an older iPhone. I'll edit. I have multiple iPhones, but I've been testing this, and the photos look just as good edited on my iPad as it did on the iPhone 16 Pro Max. And I actually edited it quicker on the iPad because it's more powerful than the 16 Pro Max was, because it can do more multitasking. So, and the chipset's a little more powerful. So the M3 is actually better in multitasking scores. So that is a big deal. If you're looking to upgrade, stick to iPhone 11. If you're coming from an iPhone XS Max, yes. But if it's an iPhone 11 Pro Max or Pro 11 Pro, wait until September, October when they release iPhone 17s. Then it might be worth an upgrade from the 11. Right now, if that's what you have and you're okay with it, the cameras aren't bad on iPhone 11 Pro Max. The only reason I would update from an iPhone 11 is because you want 5G connectivity. If you're coming from a 12, you start getting into 5G and stuff like that, so you're good. For Mr. Positive Live, I'm Mr. Positive. If you have an iPhone 11, if you're coming from an iPhone 12, 13, if you're coming from an iPhone, 12 Pro, Pro Max, all the way up to, say, the 15, don't upgrade to the 16. It's not worth it. And if you're coming from a 15, it's like 5% better than the 16. The 16 is probably 5% better in overall bench scores. It's like 5%. And it's almost not even worth it. Wait until the 17 comes out if you're coming from an 11, because the iPhone 11 is still supported for one more year of iOS 19 coming, so no sense to really upgrade until the 17. From Mr. Positive Live, I'm Mr. Positive.